The morning I found my prize roses decapitated with a tire iron, I knew my ex-wife's new husband had finally crossed the line from annoying to unforgivable. I'm Eli Chambers, 41 years old, high school English teacher by day and obsessive gardener by weekend. 3 years ago, my wife Samantha decided I wasn't man enough for her tastes and traded me in for Chad McMillan, a walking testosterone advertisement who owns the local CrossFit gym and drives a lifted Ford F-250 with truck nuts hanging from the hitch. Classy guy, really. Standing in my backyard at 7 a.m., coffee mug trembling in my hand, I surveyed the carnage. My David Austin roses, varieties I'd babied for 2 years, lay scattered across the lawn like botanical body parts. The wooden fence separating my property from the alley had fresh tire tracks gouged into it, and there, perched mockingly on my garden gnome, was a pink flamingo lawn ornament with "Real Men Don't Garden" scrawled across its plastic belly in black Sharpie. Son of a bastard, I muttered, then immediately felt guilty. My daughter Lucy was probably still sleeping, and despite everything, I tried to maintain some dignity in this mess. My phone buzzed. A text from Samantha. "Heard you had some yard trouble. Maybe try something more masculine next time." I stared at that laughing emoji for a solid 30 seconds, feeling something dark and patient unfurling in my chest. Not rage. Rage was hot and stupid. This was colder, more methodical. You see, most people don't understand gardening. They think it's about pretty flowers and weekend therapy. But real gardening is about control. It's about creating something beautiful through careful planning, patience, and the willingness to eliminate anything that threatens your vision. Weeds, pests, diseases. You identify the problem, and you deal with it systematically. Chad McMillan had just become a weed in my garden. I called Samantha. She answered on the 4th ring, and I could hear Chad's obnoxious laugh in the background. "Eli, what's wrong now?" Her voice had that patronizing tone she'd perfected during our divorce proceedings. "Your boyfriend destroyed my roses." Oh, come on. Chad was just having a little fun. Boys will be boys, you know. Maybe if you'd focused on being more of a man instead of playing in the dirt, we'd still be married. The line went quiet, except for Chad shouting something about protein shakes to someone in their kitchen. "Sam," I said carefully, "those roses cost me $800 and 2 years of work." "And? What are you going to do about it? Call the police? Over some flowers?" She laughed, that sharp, dismissive sound I'd grown to hate during our marriage. "Seriously, Eli, maybe this is the universe telling you to find a real hobby. Chad says gardening is for women and—" I hung up. My neighbor, Mrs. Harlow, was peeking over her fence, her gray hair in curlers and her expression hungry for gossip. "Morning, Eli. Heard some commotion last night around midnight. Everything all right?" "Just peachy, Mrs. Harlow." I forced a smile. "Someone decided to redecorate my garden." She clucked her tongue sympathetically, but I could see the excitement in her eyes. By noon, the entire neighborhood would know about my flower troubles, and by evening, it would be twisted into some story about my mental breakdown following the divorce. I spent the next hour cleaning up the mess, carefully collecting the severed rose heads and photographing the damage. As I worked, my mind was already spinning. Chad thought he was dealing with some pathetic, emasculated English teacher who would roll over and take it. He was about to learn that underestimating a man with a master's degree in literature and a detailed understanding of long-term planning was a serious tactical error. My phone rang. Nate Morrison, my best friend since college, and the only person who'd stuck by me through the divorce. "Dude, I just heard. Sam's friends are posting about it on Facebook. They're calling it the Great Garden Massacre of 2024. They're posting about it. Yeah, man. Trina shared a photo of your yard with some caption about real men versus flower boys. It's got like 50 likes already." I closed my eyes. Trina Walsh was Samantha's closest friend and biggest enabler, a 40-year-old real estate agent who treated gossip like a competitive sport. If she was broadcasting this, it meant Sam had planned it as public humiliation, not just property damage. You know what, Nate? I think it's time I reminded this town that English teachers know a thing or two about dramatic irony. What's that supposed to mean? It means Chad and Samantha are about to discover that the quiet guy always makes the most dangerous enemy. After hanging up, I walked through my house, really looking at it for the first time in months. I'd bought this place after the divorce, a 1920s craftsman with good bones and a huge backyard. Sam had gotten the suburban McMansion in the divorce, but I'd gotten something better. Privacy, space, and the kind of old house character that came with thick walls and a basement perfect for projects. The house sat on a corner lot with mature oak trees providing natural screening from most neighbors. The backyard was my sanctuary, or had been, until this morning. But as I surveyed the space with new eyes, I realized it had potential for more than just flowers. It had potential for justice. My daughter Lucy arrived that afternoon for her weekend visit. At 16, she'd inherited my sarcasm and her mother's stubborn streak, a combination that made her both my greatest joy and my biggest challenge. "Dad, your yard looks like a plant graveyard," she said, dropping her overnight bag by the front door. "Your stepfather decided to express his artistic vision with a tire iron." Lucy rolled her eyes. "Chad's such a tool. Mom thinks it's hilarious, but honestly, it's just pathetic. Like, who destroys someone's garden? What's next, kicking puppies?" I hugged her, grateful that at least one person in my family hadn't completely lost their moral compass. "How are things at home?" "Loud. Chad's always yelling about something. The TV's too quiet. His protein powder is the wrong flavor. The neighbors are parking too close to his precious truck. And Mom just enables it. She thinks his tantrums are passionate and masculine." Lucy made air quotes, her expression disgusted. "I'm sorry you have to deal with that. It's whatever. But Dad, I heard them talking last night after they got back from trashing your roses. Chad was bragging to his gym buddies on speakerphone about teaching the flower boy a lesson. Mom was laughing and saying maybe now you'd man up and move on." Something cold settled in my stomach. They were bragging about it? "Yeah, and Chad said something about how, if you tried to retaliate, he'd finish the job properly next time. Whatever that means." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She was growing up in a house where destruction was celebrated and cruelty was considered entertainment, where her mother had chosen a partner who solved problems with violence and intimidation. That's when I made my decision. "Lucy, how would you feel about helping your old man with a little project?" She grinned, and for a moment, she looked exactly like I had at her age, ready for trouble and smart enough to avoid getting caught. "What kind of project?" "The kind that teaches bullies about consequences." Sunday morning, I drove to Morrison's auto shop, where Nate worked weekends. I needed an ally, and despite his tendency toward moral flexibility, Nate was mechanically gifted and owed me 3 years of free beer and divorce counseling. I found him elbow-deep in the engine of a 1987 Camaro, cursing creatively at a stubborn bolt. "I need your help with something," I said without preamble. Nate emerged from under the hood, wiping grease on his coveralls. "If this is about getting back at Chad, count me out. That guy could bench press both of us without breaking a sweat. I'm not planning to arm wrestle him, Nate. I'm planning to outsmart him." "Explain." I outlined my plan. It was elegant in its simplicity. Chad was a creature of habit who solved every problem with brute force. He'd destroyed my garden as a show of dominance, expecting me to either cower or escalate to physical confrontation, both scenarios where he held the advantage. Instead, I was going to turn my property into a carefully orchestrated lesson in humility. "You want to booby-trap your own yard?" Nate looked skeptical. "Not booby-trap, defend. Everything I'm planning is perfectly legal. motion-activated security measures designed to deter trespassers and document criminal activity. And the part where you humiliate Chad in front of the entire neighborhood? That's just a happy coincidence. Nate grinned. You know what? I'm in. But only because Chad hit on my girlfriend at Murphy's bar last month and called me a grease monkey when I told him to back off. We spent the afternoon at Home Depot, assembling what I privately called the Chad deterrent system. Motion-activated sprinklers, security cameras with night vision, wireless speakers, and several bags of organic fertilizer that would serve a dual purpose. The plan was simple. Chad would inevitably return to finish what he'd started. When he did, he'd trigger a sequence of events that would leave him soaked, humiliated, and thoroughly documented for both the police and social media. Monday evening, Lucy helped me install the final components. She had inherited my attention to detail and her mother's ruthless streak, a combination that made her surprisingly effective at psychological warfare. Dad, you should post something on Facebook, she suggested, adjusting the angle on one of the cameras. Something that will definitely make Chad want to come back. Like what? Something about not letting bullies win. Maybe a photo of you replanting the roses with some caption about perseverance. Chad's ego won't be able to handle the idea that his little stunt didn't break you. Smart kid. I posted a photo of myself kneeling in the garden, planting new rose bushes with the caption, "Some people think destruction makes them powerful. Real strength is building something beautiful and protecting it. My roses will bloom again." Within an hour, the post had 12 likes and 3 supportive comments from neighbors. More importantly, Trina Walsh had shared it with the comment, "Some people never learn." Tuesday night, Lucy was at her mother's house, and I was grading essays when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Nice flowers, Teach. Be a shame if something happened to them again." I screenshotted the message and added it to the folder I'd been building. Then I settled into my living room chair with a cup of coffee and my laptop, ready to monitor the security cameras. At 11:47 p.m., Chad's lifted truck rumbled into the alley behind my house. I watched on my laptop screen as he parked and climbed out, tire iron in hand. He was drunk. I could tell by the way he swayed as he approached my fence. He wasn't alone. 2 other guys emerged from the truck, both carrying beer bottles and laughing about something. I recognized one of them, Tommy Breslin, who worked at Chad's gym and had the intellectual capacity of a houseplant. "This is the Pussy's Garden," Chad announced loudly enough for my cameras to pick up clearly. "Gonna teach him what happens when you embarrass a real man online." He swung the tire iron at my newly planted roses, but this time I was ready. The first motion sensor triggered, and suddenly my backyard lit up like a football stadium. Chad stumbled backward, cursing and shielding his eyes. The second sensor activated the sprinkler system, but instead of water, the sprinklers released a mixture I'd concocted from liquid fertilizer, food coloring, and a scent enhancer I'd borrowed from a friend who worked at the local fish market. The smell hit them first. Tommy immediately started gagging. Chad, soaked in green-tinted liquid that smelled like a combination of rotten eggs and low tide, began shouting obscenities that would have made a sailor blush. But I wasn't finished. The third sensor triggered the wireless speakers I'd hidden around the yard, which began blasting a recording I'd made of myself reading Shakespeare's Sonnet 18 in my most pretentious English teacher voice. "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate." Chad, dripping and stinking, tried to flee toward his truck, but the final component of my system activated. A series of motion-activated sprinklers along the fence line that had been loaded with a mixture of organic fertilizer and purple paint. By the time Chad and his friends made it back to their truck, they looked like they'd been dunked in a septic tank and then tie-dyed by a vindictive hippie. The smell was so intense that Mrs. Harlow's dog started howling 3 houses away. I watched from my window as Chad's truck peeled out of the alley, leaving behind the tire iron and a trail of purple drips. Then I uploaded the security footage to my computer and went to bed with the satisfaction of a job well done. Wednesday morning brought consequences I hadn't anticipated. My doorbell rang at 7 a.m., and I opened it to find Officer Janet Rain, a woman I'd taught in high school who'd become one of the town's most respected cops. "Morning, Eli. Got a complaint about some kind of disturbance at your property last night." "Really? I didn't hear anything unusual." I invited her in for coffee, noting that she was trying not to smile. "Chad McMillan filed a report claiming you assaulted him with some kind of chemical weapon. That's a serious accusation. Do you have evidence of an assault?" She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo that had been making the rounds on social media. Chad, purple and reeking, standing next to his truck with his middle finger raised toward my house. "He posted this himself about an hour after the alleged incident," Officer Rain said, along with several posts describing his plan to get revenge on the flower boy. Interestingly, he also posted photos of your destroyed garden from Sunday night, along with some fairly detailed descriptions of how he taught you a lesson. I raised my eyebrows. So he documented his own criminal trespassing and vandalism? Appears so. He's also demanding that you pay for detailing his truck and replacing his clothes. "I'd be happy to discuss compensation," I said carefully, "right after he pays for the $800 in roses he destroyed, plus the cost of my new security system." Officer Rain finally allowed herself to smile. "Your security system is quite impressive. Motion-activated sprinklers are perfectly legal for property protection. The smell, however, is going to linger for a while." I used organic fertilizer. It's environmentally friendly. "And the purple dye?" "Food coloring, also organic." She shook her head, still grinning. "Eli, I have to ask, are you planning any further security enhancements?" Officer Rain, "I'm a simple English teacher who just wants to tend his garden in peace. If certain individuals choose to trespass on my property, they'll have to deal with whatever legal deterrents I've installed. Just try to keep it legal, okay? And maybe warn the neighbors about the smell next time." After she left, I checked my phone to find 17 missed calls from Samantha and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. "What did you do to Chad?" "He smells like a rotting fish and he's purple." "This isn't funny, Eli. He's talking about suing you. Call me back." I didn't call back. Instead, I posted another Facebook update. "Upgraded my home security system last night. Amazing how effective proper preparation can be. Thanks to everyone who's been supportive during this difficult time." The post got 43 likes and 16 comments, including one from my principal. "Glad to see you're taking care of yourself, Eli. Looking forward to hearing about your garden's progress." But the comment that made me smile came from Lucy. "Dad's roses are going to be beautiful this year. Some people just don't appreciate art. Chad McMillan had wanted to teach me a lesson about being a real man. Instead, he'd learned that real power doesn't come from tire irons and lifted trucks. It comes from being smarter than your enemies and patient enough to let them destroy themselves." Thursday morning brought an unwelcome surprise. Principal Green calling me into his office before first period. Margaret Green had been my boss for 6 years, and we'd always maintained a professional relationship built on mutual respect and her appreciation for my classroom management skills. But as I sat across from her desk, watching her shuffle through what appeared to be printed Facebook screenshots, I realized our dynamic was about to change. "Eli, I need to ask you about this situation with your ex-wife's husband." "What situation would that be?" She turned her computer monitor toward me, showing Chad's Facebook page. He'd posted a series of photos, his purple-stained truck, his ruined clothes, and a close-up of his face that made him look like a reject from a low-budget superhero movie. "He's claiming you attacked him with chemicals. I installed motion-activated sprinklers on my property after someone vandalized my garden. If Mr. McMillan was sprayed, it's because he was trespassing." Principal Green studied me carefully. "Eli, I've known you for 6 years. You're one of our most reliable teachers, and your students respect you. But this situation is creating complications." "What kind of complications?" "Parents are talking. Some are concerned about your mental state after the divorce. Others think it's funny that you outsmarted the local tough guy. But either way, you're becoming a distraction. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Are you questioning my ability to do my job? Not yet. But if this escalates, it could affect your position. We can't have teachers involved in public feuds, even if they're technically in the right. I nodded. Stay quiet, take the abuse, and don't make waves. It was the same message I'd heard all my life. Let the bullies win, because fighting back makes you look bad. I understand, I said. I just want to tend my garden in peace. Good. And Eli, consider taking down those Facebook posts. They're attracting more attention than you want. I left her office feeling like I'd been punched. Chad could destroy my property and threaten me. But the moment I defended myself, I was the problem. My first period class went smoothly until Jake Morrison, Nate's nephew, raised his hand. Mr. Chambers, is it true you booby-trapped your yard and turned Mr. McMillan purple? The class erupted in whispers and laughter. I saw phones pulled out under desks. Mr. Morrison, we're discussing the crucible. Would you like to share your thoughts on how rumors can destroy communities? Jake looked embarrassed, but the damage was done. By lunch, every student would know their English teacher was involved in suburban warfare. The day worsened during my planning period when Samantha showed up at my door. We need to talk, she said, striding in uninvited. She looked exactly the same as during our marriage, perfectly styled blonde hair, expensive clothes, and that controlled fury she'd perfected in our divorce. This is my workplace, Sam. You can't just... You humiliated my husband in front of the whole town. Your husband destroyed my garden and threatened me. I have security footage of him trespassing and vandalizing my property again. She waved dismissively. They were just flowers, Eli. What you did was deliberate and cruel. What I did was protect my property legally. Legal methods. She laughed sharply. You turned him purple. He can't work looking like that. Clients are canceling because of the smell. Maybe he should have considered that before vandalizing my property. Samantha moved closer, her eyes calculating. Here's what's going to happen. You'll apologize publicly, pay for Chad's truck detailing and new clothes, and remove those security cameras. Or what? Or I'll make sure everyone knows how unstable you've become since the divorce, how you've been obsessing over me and Chad, using Lucy to spy on us, turning into a bitter ex-husband. The threat hung in the air. Samantha was better at social manipulation. She had the connections and charisma to make people believe her version. You'd lie about me to protect him? I'd tell the truth to protect my family. Chad's not perfect, but at least he's not pathetic. After she left, I sat in my empty classroom feeling trapped. My phone buzzed with a text from Nate. Dude, we need to talk. Can you meet me at Murphy's after work? Murphy's bar was the kind of place where teachers definitely shouldn't be seen drinking on weekday afternoons, but I needed to talk to someone who understood the situation. I found Nate in a corner booth, already halfway through a beer and looking uncomfortable. Okay, just tell me, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. Tell you what? Whatever you're about to say that's going to make this day even worse. Nate took a long drink and avoided my eyes. Sam came to see me yesterday. And? She's worried about you, man. She thinks this whole thing with Chad has pushed you over some kind of edge. She's worried about me? Her boyfriend destroyed my garden and threatened me, and she's worried about me? Look, I'm just telling you what she said. She thinks you're becoming obsessed with getting revenge, and she's concerned about Lucy being caught in the middle. I stared at my oldest friend, reading the subtext in his expression. She got to you. What's that supposed to mean? She convinced you that I'm the problem here, that defending myself makes me the bad guy. Nate shifted uncomfortably. I'm not saying you're the bad guy, but maybe it's time to let this go. Chad learned his lesson, you got your revenge, everyone had a good laugh. Why not just move on? Because it's not over. You think Chad's going to just accept being humiliated? You think Samantha's going to let this slide? They're planning something, Nate. I can feel it. Or maybe you're becoming paranoid. The words hit like a physical blow. My best friend, the one person I'd counted on to understand, was looking at me like I was some kind of unhinged stalker. You think I'm paranoid? I think you're hurt and angry, and those are dangerous emotions when you're dealing with people like Chad McMillan. I stood up, leaving my untouched beer on the table. Thanks for the psychological evaluation, Dr. Morrison. Really helpful. Eli, wait. But I was already walking away, understanding with perfect clarity that I was now completely alone in this fight. That evening, Lucy called while I was installing additional security cameras around my property. Dad, Mom's acting really weird. She keeps asking me questions about what you've been doing, whether you've been talking about her and Chad, stuff like that. What did you tell her? Nothing important. But Dad, I think she's planning something. She and Chad have been having these whispered conversations that stop whenever I walk into the room. Lucy, I need you to be careful around them, okay? Don't give them any information about what I'm doing, and if they start asking you to spy on me, they already did. Chad offered me $50 to take pictures of your crazy security setup next time I visit. What did you say? I told him I'd think about it. But Dad, I'm not going to spy on you. Whatever you're planning, I'm on your side. After hanging up, I stood in my backyard, looking at the cameras, motion sensors, and other defensive measures I'd installed. To an outside observer, it probably did look like the work of someone who'd lost perspective. But I knew something my critics didn't. Chad McMillan wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. Samantha wasn't the type to let anyone make her look foolish. And in a small town like ours, reputation was everything. They were planning their counterattack, and when it came, I intended to be ready. I just hadn't expected the first strike to come from my own best friend. Friday morning, I discovered exactly how deep the betrayal ran when I found Nate's business card tucked under my windshield wiper with a handwritten note. Eli, Sam asked me to give you this. She wants to hire me to fix the damage to Chad's truck. Thought you should know. N. The card was for Morrison's auto shop, but the note was in Samantha's handwriting. Since you're responsible for the damage, you can pay for the repairs. $200, cash only. I stared at the note, understanding dawning like a cold sunrise. Nate hadn't just been convinced I was becoming unstable. He'd been actively working with Samantha. The uncomfortable conversation at Murphy's bar hadn't been concern for my mental health. It had been reconnaissance. My phone rang. Lucy calling before school. Dad, you need to know something. I heard Mom on the phone last night talking to someone about the plan. She said Phase 1 was working and you were already isolated from your friends. Phase 1? Yeah, and she mentioned something about your job. Dad, I think she's trying to get you fired. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Samantha wasn't just defending Chad's honor, she was orchestrating a systematic campaign to destroy my life, isolate me from friends, undermine my professional reputation, and probably find some way to use my instability against me in future custody disputes. It was actually brilliant, in a sociopathic way. Lucy, I need you to do something for me, but it might be dangerous. What kind of dangerous? The kind where you pretend to go along with what your mother wants while actually helping me. Can you handle that? Dad, I've been handling Mom's manipulation my entire life. What do you need? I outlined my plan. It was risky, and it required Lucy to lie convincingly to her mother, but it was the only way to turn Samantha's strategy against her. Are you sure about this? Lucy asked. Sweetheart, your mother has made one critical error. She thinks I'm the same pushover she divorced 3 years ago. She's about to learn that teaching high school English for 15 years teaches you a few things about psychological warfare. That afternoon, I drove to Morrison's auto shop for a conversation with my former best friend. I found him working on Chad's truck. The purple stains were mostly gone, but the smell of fish and fertilizer still lingered. $1,200 seems steep for a paint job, I said. Nate looked up from the engine, guilt written across his face. Eli, look, I can explain. No need. I understand perfectly. Samantha offered you something. Money, probably, or maybe just the promise of staying in her good graces. And you decided that was worth more than 15 years of friendship. It's not like that. Then explain it to me. Nate set down his wrench and wiped his hands on his coveralls. She's scared of you, man. Really scared. She thinks you're planning something bigger than garden sprinklers. And you believe her? I think you're angry enough to do something stupid, and I think Chad's the kind of guy who might really hurt you if you push him too far. So, you decided to help them push me first? Nate had the grace to look ashamed. I thought if I could get you to back down, maybe everyone could just move on. By betraying me to my ex-wife? By trying to keep you from ruining your life over some damn flowers? The words hung in the air between us. I could see that Nate genuinely believed he was helping me, which somehow made the betrayal worse. Those flowers represented 2 years of work, Nate. They were the one thing in my life that was purely mine, that I'd created and nurtured and been proud of. And Chad destroyed them because he could, because he knew I wouldn't fight back in any way that mattered. So you proved him wrong. You got your revenge. Why can't you just let it go? Because it was never about the flowers. It was about respect. And now Samantha's trying to destroy my job, my reputation, and my relationship with my daughter because she can't stand the idea that I finally stood up for myself. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots I'd been collecting, social media posts from Samantha's friends calling me unstable and obsessed, comments suggesting I was stalking my ex-wife, and speculation about my fitness as a teacher and father. She's been building a narrative, Nate, and you helped her do it. Nate stared at the phone, his expression shifting from guilt to understanding to something that might have been fear. Jesus, Eli. I didn't know she was doing all this. Now you do. So the question is, are you going to keep helping her, or are you going to help me stop her? What are you planning? Something that will end this permanently, but I need to know if you're with me or against me. Nate looked at Chad's truck, then back at me. What do you need? That evening, I put the first phase of my counterattack into motion. Lucy had agreed to accidentally leave her phone unlocked around Samantha, with a fake text conversation visible that suggested I was planning to do something big at the school's upcoming spring festival. The Spring Festival was our town's biggest annual event, a weekend celebration held on the school grounds with food vendors, local bands, and community booths. It would be the perfect place for a public confrontation, which was exactly what I wanted Samantha to think I was planning. While she focused on that obvious threat, I would be implementing my real strategy. Saturday morning, I drove to the county courthouse and filed a formal complaint against Chad McMillan for criminal trespassing, vandalism, and harassment. I included the security footage, the threatening text messages, and documentation of the property damage. Then I visited the office of Jennifer Walsh, ironically, Trina Walsh's sister and the town's most aggressive civil attorney. Jennifer had built her practice on the principle that being related to the town gossip gave her unique insights into her neighbors' vulnerabilities. I want to sue Chad McMillan and my ex-wife for harassment, defamation, and conspiracy to damage my professional reputation, I told her. Jennifer reviewed my evidence with the focused attention of a predator evaluating prey. This is quite comprehensive. You've been planning this for a while. I've been documenting everything since the night they destroyed my garden. Smart. And you're sure you want to go nuclear? Once we file this, there's no going back to quiet suburban feuding? They made it nuclear when they decided to go after my job and my relationship with my daughter. In that case, let's destroy them. Sunday evening, Lucy called with an update on the home front. It's working, Dad. Mom's completely focused on the spring festival. She and Chad are planning some kind of public confrontation to make you look crazy in front of the whole town. What kind of confrontation? I'm not sure about the details, but I heard Chad talking about finishing this once and for all, and Mom saying something about getting everything on video. They're planning to provoke me into doing something that will justify their narrative about my instability. Probably. But Dad, I also found something else. Mom's been meeting with some lawyer about trying to get your custody reduced. She has a whole folder of screenshots and witness statements about your erratic behavior. The final piece of Samantha's strategy clicked into place. She wasn't just trying to humiliate me, she was trying to take Lucy away. That's when I realized this war had moved far beyond garden sprinklers and purple dye. Samantha had declared total warfare on my life, and she expected me to play defense until she'd taken everything that mattered to me. She was about to learn that English teachers don't just understand literature, we understand tragedy. And in every great tragedy, the moment when the hero stops reacting and starts acting is the moment when the real story begins. The Spring Festival was in 6 days. Samantha thought she was walking into her moment of triumph. Instead, she was walking into the final act of her own downfall. The Spring Festival dawned gray and humid, with the kind of oppressive weather that made everyone irritable and prone to poor decisions. Perfect conditions for what I had planned. I arrived at the school grounds early, ostensibly to help set up the English department's used book sale, but actually to implement the final phase of my strategy. Lucy had spent the week feeding her mother carefully crafted misinformation about my plans for a dramatic public confrontation, and Samantha had taken the bait completely. According to Lucy's intelligence reports, Samantha and Chad were expecting me to have some kind of public breakdown that would justify everything they'd done and provide perfect ammunition for their custody case. They weren't wrong about the public confrontation part. They were just wrong about who was going to be humiliated. By noon, the festival was in full swing. The school parking lot had been transformed into a maze of vendor booths, food trucks, and small stages featuring local musicians. Families wandered between attractions while teenagers clustered around the gaming booths and parents nursed overpriced coffee. I spotted Samantha near the PTA information booth, holding court with her usual circle of friends. She was wearing a sundress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and the kind of smile that meant she was anticipating something unpleasant happening to someone else. Chad was harder to miss. 6'3" of muscle and testosterone, wearing a tank top that advertised his gym, and the kind of aggressive posture that made parents instinctively move their children to the other side of the walkway. They were both watching me with the focused attention of predators waiting for their prey to stumble into range. I spent the first hour playing my part perfectly, the nervous, increasingly agitated ex-husband who was clearly building towards some kind of public scene. I made a point of checking my phone frequently, muttering to myself and shooting pointed looks in Samantha's direction. By 1:30, I could see her friends pulling out their phones, ready to document whatever breakdown they expected me to have. At 2:04 p.m., Jennifer Walsh arrived. She walked directly to the PTA booth where Samantha was stationed and handed her an official-looking envelope. I was too far away to hear the conversation, but I could see Samantha's expression shift from confusion to shock to fury as she read the contents. The envelope contained copies of the criminal charges I'd filed against Chad, the civil lawsuit I was bringing against both of them, and a formal cease and desist order regarding their harassment campaign. But more importantly, it contained something Samantha hadn't expected. A complete breakdown of her conspiracy to damage my professional reputation, including screenshots of her friends' social media posts, documentation of her attempts to turn my colleagues against me, and evidence of her plan to use fabricated claims of instability in a custody modification case. Jennifer had done her homework. The legal documents included quotes from Facebook posts, text message screenshots that Lucy had obtained from Samantha's phone, and even a recording of Chad bragging about teaching the flower boy a lesson at Murphy's bar. I watched from across the festival as Samantha read through the evidence of her own carefully orchestrated campaign. Her face went through several interesting color changes before settling on a pale shade that matched her sundress. Chad, reading over her shoulder, was having a more dramatic reaction. His voice carried across the festival grounds as he began shouting about legal bullshit and pussy lawyers. That's when Principal Green appeared at my elbow. "Eli, what exactly is happening over there?" "I believe Mr. McMillan is having a public reaction to being served with legal papers documenting his criminal harassment of a school district employee." She looked at me sharply. "You're suing them?" "I'm holding them accountable for a systematic campaign of harassment, property destruction, and defamation. Everything I've done has been legal and documented. Everything they've done has been criminal and stupid." Principal Green watched as Chad's voice got louder and his gestures more aggressive. Several families were backing away from the scene, and I could see parents pulling out phones to record what looked like an unstable man having a public meltdown. "Is this going to reflect poorly on the school?" she asked. "Only if you consider it poor reflection when your employees refuse to be victimized by local bullies." The situation escalated quickly from there. Chad, apparently realizing that a significant portion of the festival was now watching him have a tantrum, decided the appropriate response was to march across the festival grounds and confront me directly. "You think you're real smart, don't you, Teach?" he snarled, getting close enough that I could smell the beer on his breath. "Think you can hide behind lawyers and paperwork like a little bastard?" I maintained the calm, reasonable tone I used with disruptive students. "Mr. McMillan, you're creating a public disturbance at a school event. I suggest you lower your voice and step back." "Or what? You gonna spray me with your little sprinklers again?" The crowd around us was growing larger, and I could see phones being raised to record the confrontation. This was the moment Samantha had been planning for, the moment when I would either cower or escalate, proving that I was either pathetic or unstable. Instead, I did something she hadn't anticipated. I smiled. "Actually, Chad, I'm not going to do anything. You see, I've already won." "Won what?" "This." I gestured to the crowd of people recording his public meltdown. "In about an hour, video of you screaming at a high school teacher at a family event is going to be all over social media. Your gym clients are going to see their trainer acting like an unstable drunk. The parents at this school are going to see you threatening an employee. And the judge who reviews my lawsuit is going to have perfect documentation of your inability to control your temper." Chad's face went through several color changes as the implications sank in. "But here's the really beautiful part," I continued, still smiling. "I don't have to do anything except stand here and let you destroy yourself. Every word you say, every threat you make, every aggressive gesture, it's all being recorded by dozens of people. You're building my case for me." That's when Samantha intervened, grabbing Chad's arm and trying to pull him away from the scene. "Chad, stop. He's right. Everyone's watching." But Chad was too angry and too drunk to listen to reason. He shook off Samantha's grip and stepped closer to me. "You think you're so damn smart. I think I'm smart enough to let you hang yourself with your own rope," I replied calmly. "And I think your wife is finally realizing that she hitched her wagon to a man who solves problems by screaming at teachers in front of children." The crowd around us had grown silent, watching the confrontation with the horrified fascination usually reserved for car accidents. I could see Samantha looking around at all the recording phones, understanding that her carefully planned narrative was collapsing in real time. Instead of documenting my breakdown, dozens of people were recording her husband's public meltdown and her own association with his behavior. Chad raised his hand as if to grab me, but before he could make contact, Officer Rain appeared beside him. "That's enough, Chad. You need to come with me." "I didn't do anything. He's the one." "He's standing calmly while you scream threats at him in front of half the town. Let's go." As Officer Rain led Chad away, I turned to address the crowd that was still watching. "I apologize for the disruption, everyone. Sometimes when you stand up to bullies, they don't take it well. I hope this doesn't ruin anyone's day at the festival." The response was immediate and gratifying. Applause. Not from everyone, but from enough people that the message was clear. The town had just watched a calm, reasonable teacher handle an aggressive drunk, and they'd seen which man had behaved with dignity. Samantha stood frozen in the middle of the dispersing crowd, still holding the legal papers that documented her failed conspiracy. Her friends had melted away, apparently deciding that being associated with this particular drama wasn't worth the social cost. I walked over to her, keeping my voice low and reasonable. "Sam, this is over. The harassment, the social media campaign, the attempts to damage my career, all of it stops now. If you want to fight the lawsuit, that's your choice. But if you want to avoid having your entire strategy exposed in open court, I suggest you consider settling." "You planned this," she whispered. I responded to it. "There's a difference. You declared war on my life because you couldn't stand the idea that I'd finally learned to fight back. But you made one critical error." "What's that?" "You assumed I was still the same man you divorced, the one who would take abuse quietly to keep the peace. That man is gone, Sam. You destroyed him when you chose Chad over our family. What you're facing now is what grew in his place." I walked away, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the festival grounds, holding the legal documentation of her own defeat. Lucy found me an hour later at the used book sale, where I was calmly helping customers and pretending my hands weren't shaking from adrenaline. "Dad, that was incredible. Mom's been sitting in her car for the past 30 minutes staring at those papers." "How do you feel about all this?" "Honestly, proud. You didn't lose your temper, you didn't sink to their level, and you proved that being smart is better than being loud." That evening, my phone started buzzing with notifications. The video of Chad's meltdown was spreading across social media, but the narrative wasn't what Samantha had planned. Instead of "unstable teacher has breakdown," the story was "local gym owner threatens teacher at school event." The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. Good for Mr. Chambers for standing up to that bully. Chad McMillan is a disgrace. Who screams at teachers? That teacher handled it perfectly. Total class act. By Sunday morning, Chad's gym had lost 12 members, and Samantha's real estate office had received several calls asking if they employed that woman whose husband threatened a teacher. Monday brought the final resolution. Jennifer Walsh called to inform me that Samantha wanted to settle out of court. She's agreed to pay for all property damage, issue a public apology, and cease all harassment. In exchange, you'll drop the civil suit. And Chad? He's pleading guilty to the criminal charges, community service and anger management classes. What about the custody issue? She's withdrawing her petition to modify custody. Apparently, her lawyer advised her that trying to prove you're unstable while her husband is on video having a public meltdown might not be the strongest legal strategy. That afternoon, I stood in my backyard, looking at my newly planted roses. They were small still, but healthy and growing. In a year or two, they'd be beautiful. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You won this round, but it's not over." I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Jennifer Walsh with a note. Evidence for the restraining order we discussed. Then I deleted the message and went back to tending my garden. Some people think revenge is about destruction. But real revenge, the kind that lasts, is about building something better and protecting it from people who would tear it down. My roses would bloom again, and this time, I'd be ready for anyone who tried to destroy them.